Okay. Are we
Okay.
ready?
Yeah, we're ready anytime.
What's the earliest memory that you have?
I do remember living with my grandparents during the Second World War, and I remember a little bit about the Second World War. I had two uncles, and both in the Navy, and then I had another uncle that was in the Marine Corps, and he was more of the professional soldier than the rest of them. That was Byron Byers, and he was my aunt's husband. Dad laughed about it because they drew straws to who was going to stay here. Because my grandfather, they ran a big sheet metal company, and my grandfather said, "I need one of you to stay here." So they drew straws, and my father drew the straw to stay here. And after about a month, well, a little girl approached him on the street, and when they were standing in line, and said, "Mister, where are you? What branch of the service are you in? You don't have a uniform." And he said, "I'm not in the service." And she said, "Well, I have 5 uncles, and they're all in the service." So he came home and he told my mother, he said, "I think I'm going to join the service." And so he decided to leave and go into the military, and that's what he did. We went out to California, and my mother and dad were, my dad was stationed out in San Diego, and my mother wanted to take a trip, so she took me. And so I remember that because that was an exciting time. That's kind of my earliest memory. By the time I got back, the war was almost over because I was born in 41, and so this was 45, and the war was over, and I was during that time.
How did your family spend time together when you were young?
We spent a lot of time with my mother's family, my mother's mother and father. They always lived close to us. I was during the war when my mother would take off and go different places. Well, I would stay with my grandparents, and so we were all together. And then the Goff family were real close, and so I was around them a lot. And they were all in Dallas. All of us were there. So
What do you remember your grandparents like?
I mean, when you think about what is the best kind of family you can have, well, that was good. I mean, we did a lot of things together, and it was good.
What did your childhood house look like?
It was a small frame, you know, wooden house, and probably about 1,200 square feet, and it was nice. And we lived. That was the one that I was born in and stayed in a lot. And then I stayed down at my grandparents' house. And theirs was a little bigger, and so. And then my other grandparents, the Goffs, they had even a little better. They did a little more than the rest of us did at the time. So stayed with them.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Mm, Probably history. I always liked history a lot. I did pretty good in school. I did good in mathematics, but I liked history a lot, and I liked geography. I liked geography a lot in those days, back in the early days.
What was your first pet?
The first pet we had, I had a little Boston Bulldog named Butch, and he was the first pet we had, and I remember him well. And then he passed away as he got a certain age, and I was probably about 10, and that was the end of that.
What did your friends do for fun?
Well, I came from a baseball family, so we did a lot of baseball, even as a little kid. And so a lot of my friends played baseball, and I played baseball, and that's what we did most of the time.
So what was your favorite baseball team?
Well, at the time, it was the Dallas Eagles. And that was, and my great uncle was the manager of the Dallas Eagles,
What was his name?
Robert Goff,
Wow,
Bobby Goff.
that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I thought when I was a little kid I was going to be a baseball player.
Wow.
But everybody in my family, my uncle managed the Dallas team, and I mean that was what our life revolved around that. And so they had the Fort Worth Cats and the Dallas Eagles and the Houston Buffs, and that was the teams then. And it was an exciting time. When we weren't going to school or church or something, we were playing baseball. Grade school, they didn't play football or basketball or anything in the grade school I went to. We played baseball.
What was the name of your church?
Uh, Originally, it was Forest Avenue Baptist, and then we moved out to another part of town, and they opened a new one called Lake Highlands Baptist. Church was a big thing then. I mean, a lot more so than now.
Did you have a best friend?
I did, well, as a little kid, we had a fellow across the street named Bernie, and we did a lot of stuff together.
What was it like when you first got air conditioning?
It was fantastic. Uh, I can remember as a kid laying there at night in the summer and just perspiring like crazy. And I'd have a little small fan that would be on a stand next to the bed that was blowing on me. And my mother would put down a bowl of water. Uh, the fan would blow across the water, and it would shoot a little bit of a spray on me. And then about every hour or two, I'd wake up and just be perspiring like crazy. That's how hot it was in Dallas during the summer. It was hard. And when air conditioning came in, we were one of the first people that got it because my father was in sheet metal, and they decided that they were going to be in air conditioning. So they got it. And there was a time where on Saturday night our house was full of people because they were all coming over to watch TV and to have air conditioning. Because we were the first ones to get it.
What do you remember most about your mother?
First thing that comes to my mind, my mother was the president of the Dallas Women's Missionary Union. And so then she went up the ranks and became president of it was the Dallas, and then it became the Texas, and then she spent time in the Southern Baptist Missionary Union. So that was the biggest thing about her, was that she was always working in the women's program.
What do you remember most about your father?
The thing that first comes to my mind is his deep voice. And we go to a restaurant, there's a fellow in there with a deep voice, and every time I hear him, it reminds me of my father. My father loved deep voices. And so he would sing, he wasn't really a singer, but he liked singing in the choir because he would lead all the bass singers. And he loved that. So that was fun to him.
What do you remember about the time when your brother was born?
Well, I was 13, almost 13 when he was born. So it was a big deal. My mother really, she didn't think that she'd ever have any children because of the condition she had. And they straightened that out, and so then she expected my brother. And it was, to me, at the time, it was very exciting because I had a little brother.
What it was like going to the movies to watch those 50s westerns?
Oh, it was wonderful. There was a time when I knew every Western star. And it used to be that every Saturday I would go to the theater, and there was, my father, the Western guy, was Tom Hicks. But then when I got involved with it, we had there was all kind of stars, Western stars. Every week we had a kid show, and the kid show would always be two Western movies, and that would be a double feature. And then they would have a break, and then we would have the regular feature come on. And most of the time, the regular feature would be Western. That was huge then. Back in the 40s, early 50s, Westerns were big.
Any stars you can remember?
When I remember, it wasn't when I was the youngest, but I remember when Audie Murphy was big in the service, won the Medal of Honor, and he became a movie star, and he made Westerns. And I remember going to see Audie Murphy. John Wayne was always a factor. I saw a lot of John Wayne movies.
Can you talk about watching big band before rock and roll?
Yes, I remember when I was a teenager, early teenager, we were all going to go to a dance. And my father had a friend who was a member of River Lake Country Club. And so we all were going to go to River Lake Country Club, and we did. And we went out there, and they had a big band, and the music. It was the old-fashioned big band with the kind. And so that was the first big dance like that I went to. Was at River Lake Country Club. And that was nice. We enjoyed it.
When did you first hear about Elvis?
I've heard about him so much of my life, it's hard to remember when I first heard about it.
What was a family vacation like back when you were a kid, teenager?
It lasted a long time, and we always had a big car. It was like a Buick, Riviera or something big, and we would drive the entire time. And so we would start early in the morning, remember it'd be dark. We'd start and we'd drive, and we'd eat all 3 meals on the road, and we would see different things, and that's what we did. That was the way the vacations were, and they lasted 2 to 3 weeks.
I like how you remember the driving more than the destination.
Yeah, I do remember the driving.
Wow.
Yeah, because I'd sit in the back seat and do things, and that's what it was.
What was your first job?
Well, I enjoyed the paper route. I did that for a long time. And when I was 10 or 11, I did that until I was 16. You had to be 16 because everything was unionized. And the union didn't take anybody less than 16. But then I enjoyed working for my dad. He was in the sheet metal business, and so I could work as a helper.
Right.
Everything was in those days, and he didn't stay with the union. Once he started their own company, he left the union and just went independent.
Did you ever go to a World's Fair?
We were at a World's Fair once. I was on vacation, and so we went into a World's Fair up in is it Seattle? I think it was Seattle, and we went to the World's Fair.
What things did you do in Dallas when you were a teenager?
I started high school going to Woodrow Wilson High School, and it was a long way from us. But the first year of high school, they were building Bryan Adams, and it wasn't built. And so we took a kind of a carpool, and we had a long drive to get to Woodrow Wilson. And we did that for a year, and then they opened Bryan Adams.
What was your first car?
My first car was a 1955 Chevrolet, and that was in about '57 because I turned 16. And my father, we went out and looked and came up with a 1955 Chevrolet. It was a little pale blue with a white top.
Were you going to go to Vietnam?
Kind of crazy. I was in ROTC, and I was real big in military. And I can remember hearing my parents thinking that I would probably make a career out of the military. And I went down with a friend to volunteer. And so we went down and put our names in, and they called us up, and we interviewed, and they said, we'll get back with you. Well, after about a month, I didn't hear anything, so I called them, and they said, well, we're still on. It was, I remember the area code I was in because it was 75218. And they said, we're having a lot of volunteers, so we'll get back with you when we need you. And long story short, it went on for years. And when I was 26, I figured, I'd call them about once a week and never heard anything from them. And so by that time, Linda and I were married and we had kids. And so I just didn't say any more about it. And that was the end of it. I never went in.
What were you doing when JFK was assassinated?
I remember I was going to Texas Tech, and I remember somebody coming up and tell us, they said, did you hear the president's been shot? And we thought they were kidding. And we said, yeah, sure. And so we ended up finding out that he was shot. And it was a sad time, really. We were all, just thinking this was a miserable thing to happen. And so I can remember well that all the comments we had and all the conversation we had about it. And we were real sad about it.
What were you doing when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan?
Well, they were popular in Europe. They were big in Europe, and so they talked about them a lot. And they showed them on the newsreel. Everybody said, we got to watch Ed Sullivan tonight because the Beatles are going to be on. That was the first time I'd seen them. We all got together on the night, whenever it was a Saturday night or whenever, and there was 5 or 6 of us around watching the Beatles. So we thought when the hair was down just above the ear, we thought that was huge.
Have you met any famous people?
I remember one time George Brown and I were downtown. We were going to a movie. It was somebody famous, and I'm trying to remember who it was. We were walking down the street, and that celebrity car stopped, and the celebrity was in the back seat, and the driver looked over at us and said, do you know where so-and-so street is? And we said, yeah, it's down here and to the right. At the time, they were famous. Johnny Cash came to Texas Tech. He did one of the dances we had. I didn't talk with him or anything, but he was there and performed.
How did you meet Mamaw?
I went back to, I had a date, and I took him back to the dorm. It was Drain Hall in Lubbock. It was a freshman dorm. And I went out to go out of the car, and I saw a fraternity brother. And so he and I started talking, and he said, "Why don't you go up with us? I'm taking my date back up, and so go up with us, and we'll get together." So I walked up with them. The three of us walked up, and so they had their conversation going, and I saw a girl named Linda Collard that I knew, just from association. And so I said hello to her, and she was with Linda. And so she introduced me to her, and we had a conversation. And I don't know if it was that night. Yeah, it was. I asked her that night. I said, "Why don't we have a Coke or something?" That was the thing in the student union. "We'll have a Coke tomorrow in the student union and get acquainted." She said, "Fine." So we left there that night, and that was the next day I met her, and we went to the student union and had a Coke.
Marriage proposal when you propose?
As I remember, it was something that just kind of naturally came. So we started off, first of all, started going steady. We went together I think about 2 years before we got married. We had dated and gone out and spent time, and it just kind of worked into a natural conversation. I mean, it wasn't, a kneel down kind of thing. We just got to talking. I said, "Well, since we're going together, and we're spending a lot of time together," and then became engaged, and so it was just kind of a natural evolution that happened over a period of time.
Your first impression of your in-laws?
Uh, I liked them. I mean, they were cordial and good. And I remember that I always got along really well with both of them, but particularly my father-in-law. He was very down to earth and easy to be around. And my mother-in-law was good, but she was just a little bit more sophisticated, I'd say. I mean, she had a lot of things organized, and she did everything in a correct way. But I got along with them fine. I don't remember anything that was ever negative.
So who's your best man at your wedding? Did you have one?
Yes, George Brown, and I had been his best man. He got married after he'd been in school. We'd been in school 2 years, and so I was George's best man, and then he was my best man.
Where was your wedding?
In Lubbock. Dr. Grant was the minister.
Wow.
And he was the minister of the First Baptist Church, and that's where Linda's parents and she went. Was First Baptist. I went to Second Baptist. I had gone to Second Baptist there. So that's where we got married, First Baptist Church in Lubbock, Texas.
How many people were there?
Well, we had the chapel. We didn't have the full auditorium, I think. But it was full. We had a lot of people. I had people from friends of hers and mine, and we had a big group.
What was your first post-college job like?
I worked for a company called Burgess Manning, and they were basically a contract manufacturer. They manufactured pressure vessels and silencers, they called it, big silencers for companies. And I was an engineer. My degree was in engineering. And so I worked for them and did different things within the company in regards to sound control and all that. And that was my first job. Did that for 2 years.
Do you have favorite places to travel?
We always enjoyed Hawaii, and we went there several times. And we took one vacation with my parents that we spent about 2 weeks in Europe, and that was fun. We enjoyed that. We went to several countries. We started in England and went to Germany and went to several places. So.
You could be in any movie. What movie would you be in? James Bond. That's what you would be in.
Well, that would be. That's always been one of my favorite movies. That there's never been a James Bond I missed.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
One of the things that always comes to my mind when I think of Superman is the eyes that can penetrate, and burn things, and laser beam eyes. That's what always comes to my mind.
The secret to being married so long?
Oh, I don't know. I think communicating and keeping things out in the open. If you stay together long enough, pretty soon you got used to each other and you kind of work things out. That's what we did.
Do you have any favorite memories when you were with all four of your children?
Kids were great. All of them were smart. All of them did good in school. All of them were well behaved. So we enjoyed our kids.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.